So as most of you guys have probably heard, the Jacksonville Jaguars released running back Leonard Fournette, and he is now free to go elsewhere if a team wants him. Coming out of high school, Leonard Fournette was considered the next Herschel Walker, and he lived up to the hype at LSU. But since then, Leonard has struggled with the Jags, and thought it would be a good idea to take a quick look at his football career, and what exactly is going on with the former number 1 overall recruit in high school. But first, if you are new to the channel, I make videos all about college football, so be sure to hit that subscribe button and help me reach 11,000 subscribers by the end of September. Let me know who I should do next down in the comment section below, and turn on post notifications so you never miss another upload of mine. Now let's get started with the downfall of Leonard Fournette. Leonard Fournette grew up in the troubled area of New Orleans that was severely affected by the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. He said he witnessed someone get shot in the head, dead bodies were everywhere, hotels were on fire, and he even saw someone steal a watch from a dead person. All while he was only 10 years old. And oh yeah, his grandfather died in the storm as well. After that, he would move to Houston for 1 year before he would return to New Orleans. It was not a very nice area though, and Leonard was consistently surrounded by murder and violence. He grew up in an area with one of the highest murder rates in the country, and if someone was shot, chances are he may have known who pulled the trigger. As he got older, his cousin was shot in the chest for no apparent reason, and that took a serious toll on him. That was later on in his high school career, but I wanted to emphasize just how tough he had it growing up. We have to go back a few years though, and he credits Hurricane Katrina for fueling his love for football. Fournette was always bigger, faster, and stronger than the other kids growing up, and he had a deep fire down inside of him to succeed. When he eventually got to St. Augustine High School, the head coach knew the kind of talent he possessed, and he was going to help him achieve that. That same coach had saw kids with similar level of talents to Leonard come in, but had chosen drugs and violence over football, and Leonard was not going to let that happen. Fournette started as a true freshman for the team, and he would start every game for the entirety of his high school football career. He leaned on his dad, and the football field became a safe haven for him. He went for 2,500 yards and 30 touchdowns his freshman year, and he became the first freshman to ever get an offer from LSU. He had over 100 scholarship offers by the time he was a senior, and many people saw him as the next generational talent. His family kept him grounded, and he knew football was his way out of this mess. People hadn't seen a kid like this in nearly 20 years, and he was literally called the next Herschel Walker. He was ranked as the number 1 overall recruit in the country, and his recruitment was said to come down to LSU, Alabama, and Texas. The home state Tigers were considered the heavy favorite to land him, and it came true as he announced his decision to become an LSU Tiger during the Under Armour All-American game. As I said earlier, Leonard won every award in the state of Louisiana possible, and he was the number 1 overall player coming out of high school in 2014. His hype going into LSU was truly unreal. Going into the 2014 season, Les Miles was the head coach for the Tigers, and they were expected to have a huge year. Anthony Jennings and Brandon Harris were going to be the 2 quarterbacks, and they'd have to replace both Jeremy Hill and Alfred Blue at running back. In their first game against number 14 Wisconsin, he got 8 carries in their close win. He scored his first touchdown the following week against Sam Houston State, and had his first 100-plus yard performance against New Mexico State. He went for 140 yards and 3 touchdowns in their win over Florida, and then 113 yards in their win over number 3 Ole Miss. They would lose to number 5 Alabama in overtime, and then get shut out by Arkansas the following week. Fournette would go for a season-high 146 yards in their win over Texas A&M, and the Tigers finished with an 8-4 record. They got a bid to play in the Music City Bowl, where they lost to Notre Dame despite 143 yards and 2 touchdowns from Fournette. As a true freshman, he lived up to the hype as he went for 1,034 yards and 10 touchdowns, while averaging an absurd 5.5 yards per carry. Going into his sophomore campaign, he was expected to build upon his success from his freshman year, and he did exactly that. He went for 159 yards and 3 touchdowns in their win over number 25 Mississippi State, 228 yards and 3 touchdowns against number 18 Auburn, 244 yards and 2 touchdowns in their win over Syracuse, 233 yards and 3 touchdowns against Eastern Michigan, 158 yards and a touchdown against South Carolina, 180 yards and 2 touchdowns against Florida, and finally 150 yards against Western Kentucky. He went on an absolute tear, and he was the front runner for the Heisman Trophy at that point, plus the Tigers were 7-0. They would play against number 4 Alabama, and he would struggle in that game, and the struggles would also carry over to the Arkansas and Ole Miss games, as they lost all 3 of those matchups. He went for 159 yards and a touchdown against Texas A&M, and they won that bounce-back game. In their bowl game against Texas Tech, he went for a career-high 212 yards and 4 touchdowns in their win. When Fournette went for over 150 yards, the Tigers went 9-0 on the year. When he had less than that, they went 0-3. Fournette was literally the team as he rushed for 1,953 yards and 22 touchdowns while averaging 6.5 yards per carry. He was named to both the All-SEC First Team and a First Team All-American, and this is the level of play that everyone expected from Fournette. Going into his junior year, the hype was unreal for Leonard, and he was told he was going to win the Heisman Trophy. Unfortunately, it didn't start out well though, as he suffered a high ankle sprain in the offseason in their Week 1 opener against Wisconsin, but he bruised that same ankle and had to miss their next game. He would go for 147 yards and 2 touchdowns against Mississippi State and 101 yards against Auburn, but he re-injured his ankle in that game and he'd have to miss 2 more games. In his first game back, he broke the school record for rushing yards in a game with 284 and 3 touchdowns against Ole Miss, but Darius Geis would break that by 1 yard just a few weeks later. He played against both Alabama and Arkansas, but it was clear the injury was bothering him big time. He would play a few snaps against Florida and then miss the regular season finale against A&M. Luckily for LSU though, Darius Geis broke out this year, and he had a fantastic season to replace Fournette's production, and Leonard skipped the bowl game to avoid injury. On the year, he still managed to rush for 843 yards and 8 touchdowns, despite being injured practically the entire season. He is 4th all-time in LSU history when it comes to rushing yards, and he was still expected to be a top-end NFL draft pick. He would end up showing organizations he was worth the injury risk, and the Jacksonville Jaguars took him with the 4th overall pick and signed him to a $27 million contract. In his first career game against the Texans, he went for 100 yards and a touchdown in their win, and the hype for him was beginning to become unreal. A few weeks later, he went for 181 rushing yards against the Steelers and 130 more yards the following week against the Rams. He would suffer a small injury and also violate team rules. He missed some of the last few regular season games, but he'd have a huge rookie year. He would then help lead them to the playoffs, where they would make a run all the way to the AFC Championship game, where they would eventually lose to the Patriots. He rushed for 1,040 yards and 9 touchdowns, and was voted the 58th best player in the NFL that year. In his second year with the Jags, he injured his hamstring in the team's very first game against the Giants, and he would miss 2 more games after that. He would return and go for 53 yards against the Colts, but he just didn't look like the same player he once was. Against the Bills, he had his best game of the season as he went for 95 yards and 2 touchdowns, but he did get into some trouble. After a controversial touchdown, Fournette got into a fist fight with Bills defender Shaq Lawson, and they were both ejected and suspended. In 2018, Leonard rushed for 439 yards and 5 touchdowns, and it was a very disappointing year. With the sophomore slump out of the way, many thought he would rebound nicely in 2019. Leonard would rebound for sure, as by week 4 against the Broncos, he went for 225 yards in their win. He would go for 108 against the Panthers and 131 against the Bengals, and he was starting to look like himself a little bit. But his big game stopped there. He had 97 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Titans, but that was really his only eye-popping game the remainder of the year. He went for a pretty impressive 1,152 yards on the season, but he only scored 3 touchdowns. Fournette wasn't exactly the same player he once was, and he was starting to become a little bit difficult for the organization too, but many expected he'd be traded and get some value from him. Instead, he was released by the Jaguars yesterday, and the Jags organization continues to look like a dumpster fire, and it looks like they are tanking for Trevor Lawrence in 2021. He is now a free agent and has until later today to be picked up. Where do you guys personally think he will go? I want to know your guys' thoughts on Leonard Fournette's career, and it's crazy to see how his journey has come so far, and I really do hope the best for him moving forwards. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to smash that like button and help me reach 11,000 subscribers by the end of September. Let me know who I should do next, and if you are still here, check out my video about the downfall of Darius Geis and all my other What Happened To videos. Until next time though, peace.